It was a plan born in fire, a ring of stone forged to crush rebellion and erase resistance from the land. This wasn't just architecture, it was conquest, set in stone. Welcome to episode 1 of The Iron Ring, the story of Edward I's brutal castle network that still scars the Welsh landscape today. And at its heart stands Conwy, a castle that's never fallen, a town built behind enemy walls, a monument to a war that changed Britain forever. Wales, a land of mountains, myth, and memory. But by the 13th century, it had become the battleground of empires. For centuries, the Welsh had resisted the ambitions of outsiders. From the Norman invasion of 1066, the English kings had looked west with hunger. Yet Welsh princes held on, defiant, fragmented, proud. But everything changed with Edward I. Edward was not just a king, he was a conqueror shaped by crusade and civil war. The son of Henry III, Edward grew up in a kingdom racked with baronial revolt. He cut his teeth on battlefields, crushed rebellions, and led a crusade to the Holy Land. You might remember him as the villainous king in the film Braveheart. And while that portrayal is heavily dramatized, historians agree on one thing: Edward was ruthless, calculating, and relentless in pursuit of control. By the time he came to power in 1272, he had one mission: to secure his borders and bring all Britain under his crown. His reign, like many others of his time, was steeped in warfare and domination. But it's worth considering this. Without kings like Edward I, without the conquests and consolidations that shaped medieval Britain, the British Empire may never have risen to the global power it became centuries later. And without that empire's legacy of strength, for better or worse, would Britain have had the means to resist and ultimately help defeat the evils of the 20th century? His goal was clear: to secure his borders and bring all Britain under his crown. In 1282, that mission turned to Wales. Llywelyn ap Griffith, the last independent Prince of Wales, had resisted English rule for years. A grandson of Llywelyn the Great, he was ambitious and unyielding. When Llywelyn refused to pay homage to Edward, the king launched a full-scale invasion. It was merciless. Dafydd ap Griffith, Llywelyn's own brother, betrayed him by launching a surprise attack on English forces. But that only brought the wrath of Edward down harder. Llywelyn was ambushed and killed in December 1282. Dafydd was captured and became the first nobleman in Britain to be hanged, drawn, and quartered. By 1283, Welsh independence was over. Gwynedd, the heart of native Welsh power, had fallen. But conquest alone wasn't enough for Edward. He wanted to keep Wales, and to keep it quiet. Edward didn't just conquer with swords. He conquered with stone. He ordered the construction of a massive ring of castles across North Wales: Carnarvon, Harlech, Beaumaris, Rhuddlan, Flint, and Conwy. They weren't scattered. They were precise. Each castle controlled a vital point: a river crossing, a trade route, a population centre. These castles weren't just fortresses. They were instruments of occupation. Edward also brought in his trusted engineer, James of St. George. A master mason from Savoy, James had built fortresses across Europe. Conwy Castle rose over the River Conwy on the site of a former Cistercian abbey. Built between 1283 and 1287, it was more than a fortress. It was a message. The castle was built in a linear plan, hugging a rocky ridge. This design gave it both height and natural protection on the river-facing side. It featured 8 enormous round towers, 4 guarding the inner ward, 4 on the outer, each equipped with multiple floors, fireplaces, latrines, and arrow slits. These towers allowed full 360-degree visibility and created strongpoints that could support each other in a siege. 2 gatehouses controlled access. The main outer gatehouse with twin towers, portcullises and murder holes, and an inner gatehouse leading into the royal apartments. Between the towers were high curtain walls, nearly 15 feet thick in places, topped with walkways for archers. The walls were crenellated, allowing defenders to fire and take cover. Inside the castle, the inner ward contained the royal hall, chapel, chambers, and private rooms. This was not just a military site. It was a royal residence designed to project status and authority. The outer ward housed barracks, stores, and stables. Everything needed to survive a siege. One of Conwy's most ingenious features was its postern gate and water gate. These secret entrances allowed supplies, or an escape, via the river. During the siege of 1294, this sea access was vital for Edward's survival. Edward's domination didn't stop at castle walls. He built a full English town next to the fortress. Surrounded by 1.3 kilometers of defensive stone wall, the town of Conwy was a colonial implant. 21 towers guarded the perimeter. 3 heavily defended gates allowed access only by land or drawbridge. The layout was deliberately English. Grid streets, a central marketplace, and English law enforced throughout. The Welsh were excluded. They couldn't live inside without royal permission. This was about control, settlement, and occupation. The town walls were as formidable as the castle itself. In some places, they are still walkable today, and from those battlements, you can see how the English turned military might into everyday power. But the Welsh were not broken. In 1294, rebellion erupted. Led by Mad Og ap Llywelyn, Welsh fighters attacked English towns and garrisons across North Wales. Up to 10,000 rebels may have risen against English control. Conwy was surrounded, and inside the castle was King Edward himself. Caught off guard while inspecting the Iron Ring's defences, trapped within the walls of his own creation, Edward was forced to rely entirely on the very systems he had built. Conwy's curtain walls, its twin gatehouses, and towering keep allowed a relatively small garrison, possibly no more than a few hundred men, to hold back a vastly larger rebel force of up to 2,000 men. The high towers gave archers total command over the surrounding land. Narrow approaches funneled attackers into deadly kill zones. Any rebel trying to scale the walls faced not only arrows, but boiling oil, rocks, and crossbow bolts from above. Inside the outer ward, defenders could fall back to the inner gate and continue the fight if the first defences were breached. But most importantly, the water gate, hidden and secure, allowed ships to bring food, messages, and hope. For weeks, Edward endured winter cold, food rationing, and the threat of collapse. The town outside was likely already in rebel hands, its gates closed, the market silent. But the castle held. Eventually, royal reinforcements arrived and broke the siege. The rebellion was crushed. But Conwy had already proven itself, not just as a symbol of power, but as a fortress of survival. Before we get to the next chapter in Conwy's dramatic history, if you're anything like me, you don't just want to watch history, you want to walk through it. That's why my family has an English Heritage membership. They care for over 400 historic sites, including 66 castles across England. Our family pass has been one of the best ways to make time for proper days out, and really has been the inspiration for me making this channel. It gets us off the sofa, out into the countryside, and into places that bring history to life, and the value really adds up. A family membership starts at £82 a year, and after just a few visits, it's already paid for itself. Unlimited site access, free entry for up to 6 kids per adult, free or discounted parking, discounted events, a beautifully illustrated handbook, and a members-only magazine. And beyond the personal perks, English Heritage is a charity. Your membership helps preserve and restore these historic places for generations to come. If you're thinking of joining, use the link in the description or scan the QR code on screen. It supports both English Heritage and this channel, helping me keep telling stories like this one. Now, let's return to Conwy and the rebels who dared to take it back. In 1400, the flames of rebellion returned. Owain Glyndŵr, the last great Welsh rebel and a former English courtier, declared himself Prince of Wales. His revolt was bold, widespread, and deeply symbolic, a call for Welsh independence and self-rule. Just 1 year into the uprising, in 1401, two of Glyndŵr's men executed one of the most daring acts of the entire campaign. Disguised as carpenters, they approached Conwy Castle under the pretense of routine work. They may have claimed to be there for maintenance on the gates or towers, perhaps even holding forged orders. The guards, either fooled or bribed, let them in. Once inside, they acted swiftly. They overpowered the small garrison, opened the gates, and took control of the castle. It's believed this was a planned operation, fast, quiet, and surgical. For a short time, the rebels held Conwy Castle, one of Edward I's greatest fortresses, from within. But the English responded quickly. Troops were dispatched, and negotiations began. Rather than a bloody retaking, the situation ended in compromise. The rebels surrendered the castle in exchange for a pardon, a rare moment of diplomacy in an otherwise brutal war. Though the occupation was brief, it shook English confidence in their unbreakable iron ring and inspired Welsh support for Glyndŵr's cause. His rebellion would last nearly 15 years. Though ultimately suppressed, it became one of the most romanticized and enduring fights for Welsh identity in history. By the 1500s, Conwy had lost its military purpose. The Tudors, themselves of Welsh ancestry, ruled both England and Wales as one. During the English Civil War, Conwy was used again, held by royalists until 1646, when it surrendered to parliamentarians. Afterward, it was partially dismantled to prevent future use, but its strength meant much of it remained intact. Today, Conwy Castle is among the best preserved medieval fortresses in Europe. Its towers and walls are not just relics, they are stories carved in stone. Conwy was only one piece of Edward's plan. Carnarvon, Harlech, Rhuddlan, Beaumaris and Flint each played a role in locking down North Wales. Beaumaris in particular would become known as the most technically perfect castle in Britain, but even it owes its lineage to the prototype built at Conwy. In this series, we'll take you through each fortress in the Iron Ring to uncover how these walls shaped a nation's future. If you felt the weight of history in these stones, like this video, subscribe for the next chapter. And tell us, which Iron Ring castle do you think is the most formidable? This was episode 1, Conwy, and the fortress story is just beginning.